Hi there. My name is Jeremiah Gibson. I'm the Executive Director of the New England Association for Family and Systemic Therapy. We're a professional organization dedicated to providing the best continuing education and support for psychotherapists in Massachusetts, regardless of where said therapist is in their professional career. In Massachusetts, after a therapist graduates with their master's degree, they commonly begin their paid career in a community mental health center, or colloquially known as agencies, as we refer to them. Agency systems provide a number of great services for newer therapists, but there's also a lot of ways that agencies struggle to support the newest members of our profession. Equity in the agency experience is a 12-month weekly chat amongst people in the agency world that attempts to find ways to bring voices together so that folks from throughout the psychotherapy community, regardless of where we're at, if we're in private practice, if we're professors, if we're in policy work, can figure out how to provide the best support for our newest therapists. As I mentioned earlier, equity in the agency experience is a 12-week process. Today, we're going to just talk about an overview of the mental health system, but as we go along, we'll talk about processes, including the productivity model and how we might challenge that and think about different ways of defining success for therapists. Think about how we can create effective supervision structures that ensure that our newer therapists are getting the access to best practice and not just using supervision for administrative purposes. And also thinking about how we can provide self-care and support agency workers and setting effective boundaries with the work so that they can have healthy relationships, healthy lives outside of the therapy process as well as other things. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Sanjay Grant. Sanjay is one of my co-editors on the New England Journal for Relational and Systemic Practice. And this is a project that's put on in conjunction with the NAJRSP and NEFAST as well. So Sanjay, I'm going to turn this over to you and also to our panelists.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sanjay Grant, and my background includes I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I have practiced in agencies for the last 15 years in various settings, such as residential, in-home therapy, and outpatient. I currently work as the program director for an outpatient substance abuse program, and I also work in private practice independently. I want to say thank you to all our panelists for joining us today, and we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. And I will just go here based on my screen. I'll start with Porsche.
Hi, my name is Porsche Lockett. I have been working in community mental health agencies for the last 9 years. I'm also in private practice. I have been an outpatient in home therapy, crisis, and supervision, and am currently balancing both of those worlds.
Thank you, Porsche. Kelly.
Hi, my name is Kelly Olson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have been working in agencies for a very long time, but since grad school, it's been about 6 years. And within that, I've done one-on-one therapy, in-home family therapy. I've worked in residential programs and done some group therapy as well. I'm currently doing private practice.
Thank you, Kelly. Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma Vukelic. I use she, her pronouns. In the past, so I graduated in 2020 and since have been working in community mental health in the greater Boston area and also for practicum and internship, worked in agencies, primarily do IHT and couples and family work while also seeing individuals. I currently, Natalie, you are not alone. I also recently quit my job due to burnout, so I'm in a place of privilege where I can take a little bit of a break and return to finish my hours prior to getting licensed.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. Natalie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Gaida. I have been in the field for the last 5 years, I think, something like that. It took a bit more because of the pandemic, but I am here now. I have been licensed since December, so I am now a licensed marriage and family therapist. I think like most of you here. I have worked with individuals, couples, with groups, and since last week, I am officially working for myself.
Thank you, Natalie, and congratulations. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and we'll start our discussion. One of the things that we're talking about today, we've all collectively had years of experience in the agency world. And as Jeremiah mentioned earlier, there's a lot of positive that comes out of being in the agency world. So we'll start our discussion today by talking about some of the positive experiences we've had in the agency world and how has that helped you in developing yourselves as therapists that you are today.
I would say for me, I think that one of the positive experiences that I had was just the sense of community and support that I got working in an agency. I feel like we work with really difficult cases working in an agency, and being able to just kind of have a tough session, open my door and enter anyone else's office and just kind of debrief or grab lunch or do something like that, I think was always one of the best experiences for me, was just having that like sense of community.
I'd love to go on top of, oh, sorry.
Natalie.
I just wanted to go off of that and share that what has helped me too is that yes, you feel like you're a part of a group, but also that you do get to feel appreciated, that by the end of the day, no matter how hard the day was, it's someone else who gives us that pat on the back.
Absolutely. So sense of positive reinforcement in the moment has been helpful, as you have supervisors on staff and even co-workers who are able to give you that real-time feedback. Other folks, positive experiences. Portia.
I can add in that same line of thinking. I'm not sure how it happened, but when I started in agency work, about 4 other folks from my graduating class ended up at the same agency. And there were also additional interns from William James. So at one point, there were 8 of us in a staff meeting in different places in our career. And it was just really nice to feel like there was even a non-intentional bridge of all being together and being on the same hallway, and just being able to connect what we learned in school and then actively still being able to have the same support, being in the same agency, which we didn't plan, it just worked out that way. And also feeling like we were able to hold each other accountable to what we were learning, what we were doing, and also seeing so many different things happening, so many different needs, and so many applicable moments that sometimes we just talk about in our graduate programs, but don't necessarily get to see in person, but having all of those interconnecting things come into fruition in front of us actively.
I want to say that's definitely a valuable point where we especially talk about our interns. One of the things over the years that we were able to develop in the agency was to create a separate clinical team group for all the interns across the agency in the different offices, just so that they have that support, and where you talk about like being able to bring back some of what you're learning in school versus what you're seeing in real life, and just how that plays out for an intern. I think that was definitely a valuable piece of the intern experience that we were able to create for our young interns. Any other thoughts or feedback? Emma?
So a couple different things in thinking about the positive experience. Definitely agree. I think the sense of connection and community was what kind of invited me to be able to take on the work that I was doing. I was lucky enough to have anyone who was unlicensed was in a group supervision together. So I did an intern where I worked following grad school. So I was brand new, started in the pandemic, totally virtual, didn't know anyone. And so having those spaces for both connection and case consultation, if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have lasted as long as I did where I was. I think also what I appreciated, I think this can be, both a positive and negative depending on the day, but I think kind of being thrown into the fire, so to speak, I really appreciated kind of just jumping in and learning as I went. Again, like different need areas, ranges of, diversity related to areas of identity, and just really kind of taking it all on. And I was also lucky to have strong supervision, and supervision where I felt safe and comfortable to be myself in those spaces, which I think really kind of helped me learn through each client. So I think without that, I wouldn't be the clinician I was today. So I think just, I think for me, that was a plus, just kind of not knowing what I was doing, not having the time to overthink, and just kind of jumping right in and rolling with it. So I think that's, the connection points and the range of client presentations, I think were two things that I really felt positively about.
Love that analogy of being thrown in the fire. I think for most of us, that's definitely something that we experience. And when I was thinking of what are some of the positives that I've gained over the years, crisis management was definitely one of them. When you work in a community setting, you're almost forced to kind of learn crisis management. And sometimes we don't have enough opportunity to have a supervisor or another coworker walk you through step by step. You kind of go in and you deal with the situation and you learn as you go along. So that's definitely one of the things that I would say has also been a positive. Other positives that folks may be thinking about.
I think that something that came to my mind, I'm not sure who mentioned burnout, but I feel like I have heard this word so much, especially in the last few years. It's just everyone seems to be burnt out. And so, at some point I was like, okay, well, if my friends are, if my peers are, if everyone seems to be burnt out, does that mean that I am too? So it does help to have a group of folks that you can say like, hey, I can't sleep, I don't seem to eat well, something's off. And they're like, maybe there's something that you should do, because yes, it could be burnout, but it could also not be that, right? That it doesn't need to go to that far place, right, where I feel like I need to drop my job, right? That there are ways for me to, okay, let me just take on less work, let me take care of me a bit more. So yeah, so just that term, this like key term of burnout, I thought I would bring that up.
I think
Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say, I feel like the community, the support, all of that stuff, it really depends on which agency you're at. I definitely did not get that at every single agency I was at. But one thing that's kind of less personal, I guess, when it comes to a positive about working at an agency is, especially from my experience now being in private practice, being in the agency, you get, you have a lot of really difficult cases and you're under supervision. And regardless of why you're under that supervision, you get it consistently for the most part. Having access to things like CEUs that are readily available and free and things like that. I think that's also something that's a big benefit to being part of an agency that you don't necessarily get being on your own.
Absolutely. And that tuition reimbursement that some agencies also provide is a nice incentive. As we talk about, like, some of us are doing private practice, and we talk about how it differs sometimes from the agency world. I think one of the things that was also beneficial in the agency world was documentation, like learning how to document properly. That was something that I felt that was crucial for us. And, just being able to see the difference between someone who was taught in an agency setting versus someone who was taught in a exclusively private practice setting, and how that quality of documentation sometimes differs largely. So I thought that was also one of the beneficial things of being in the agency. Any final thoughts on other positive experiences that we may have experienced? Alrighty. If anything else comes up, feel free to share. We'll talk about some of the challenges that we have faced over the years, some of the situations that may have prompted our decision to transition out of the agency world as we move forward with our careers. So we'll look at what are some of those challenges that we have faced over the years working in agencies.
I can share. I would say some of the consistent challenges for myself was the constant change in administrative expectations that were handed down by insurance companies. I think that although we know it happens, we know it's important, it can just feel like it can feel mundane after you, like, the most of your energy is going to providing good clinical work to the clients, making sure that their needs are met, making sure that you are as full as you can be to provide for also the immense amount of numbers of clients that we have. I don't know if that's common for folks across the board, but just having so many clients, wanting to provide great service to all of those clients. And a lot of times a client is not just that one client. That client has a partner, that client has a family, that client has children, and you're also in some ways clinically helping in all those capacities too, depending on what's going on. And then having to you have your paperwork, but then the paperwork changes, and then the agency switches the system. So they go from paper records to then electronic records, and learning how to manage all those things. And some of the things that we're required to do administratively it's not necessarily what we learned at school, but you still have to do that because it was a requirement of the agency, which got handed down this information by the insurance company. And so I think this is a cycle that, regardless of whatever your concentration is, if you're working in an agency, even in private practice, I mean, it is significantly less. However, it is that changing of the tides that can be just that last thing at the end of a workday that you're like, oh, that's right, got to circle back, got to make sure the notes are done and done correctly.
Yeah, Portia, to your point, I think it's awesome that agencies they're really readily available to all of the clientele who needs them. But because of that, I think they have a longer wait list, longer, like you said, just a larger expectation for a caseload. And I can remember supervisors in the past telling me, like, well, you have student loans to pay off, so take on more clients and more cases. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I do have student loans to pay off. I should take on more. And just being really kind of overwhelmed with the amount of clients. And like you said, just having to not just work with the clients, but everything that comes with that. So yeah, definitely, I think the expectations for managing a lot of clientele was a big struggle.
I'm going to build off both of those and try to keep the passionate part of me in check around this. But I think for me, so I left a couple of months ago due to burnout. And a lot of the challenges that we'll probably talk about right now are the reason. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it came down to the additional emotional labor on top of the clinical work that I was already doing. That leadership and kind of the systems in place were expecting me to be able to hold. and not only kind of not feeling supported by people that were in positions of power, but in some ways them kind of working against, going the other way and kind of adding things onto therapists and staff that, in a system where we're already kind of operating at 120%, I think that can become really taxing. And I think the changing of the tides, Portia, that you mentioned, just kind of like all the changes that can happen, that are happening as agencies become more corporatized. I think the main thing that I felt frustrated around was, I felt comfortable sharing kind of challenges that we were facing at the time. And so, wanting to feel that those were being heard, while also feeling that I think, at least my experience was, agencies kind of hiding behind the excuse that, this is industry standard. And, if other people are able to do this, why can't you? And rather than asking the question of how can we support you, and actually following through on getting creative, even though all these systems are in place, like what are these small incentives that we can throw in to kind of help better support you? And I think everyone's spread so thin, right? Like, even if we have amazing supervisors, even if we have amazing colleagues and amazing clients, like everyone is just spread so thin. And so I think that trickled down into the clinical work that I was able to provide. And I never, I think even trying to be a good enough therapist, it felt really difficult to even make it to that benchmark for me. And just really feeling that, the expectations of productivity, the word that we all love, I think, also breeds a lot of shame for us as therapists, even when we feel like we are overexerting ourselves, and also, who all of the systems that are based in kind of what is industry standard and what is, considered productive. And I think, even that word is based in this strong white supremacist culture. So I think like that all of these kind of systems are being created around that expectation and a sense of urgency and perfectionism and all of that. I think, everyone's spread too thin, and I think it's hard to feel supported and also have the bandwidth to support not only our clients, but the people that we're working with as well. I'll rant over.
That was such a valuable point, Emma, that word where you talk about the word productivity and how that makes us have this shame factor of like, am I being productive? What does it mean to be productive as a therapist? Is it reflective in my numbers and my billable hours? I think that is so powerful. And when we talk about industry standard, like this is what we do across agencies with the expectation, and not hearing our clinicians, and how counterproductive that is to the work that we're supposed to be doing. So I think that was such a valuable point. I just wanted to go back a little bit. Both Portia and Kelly had mentioned this, where we talk about caseload. And, for some folks who may not have been in the agency setting, could we just like give an example of what does a typical caseload looks like?
I think I still don't know what a typical caseload is supposed to look like, because of the fact that I would work in an agency and I would have up to 40 something clients a week. And now in private practice, Emma, to mimic your word, there's definitely some guilt and shame around like me cutting down and now having about 25 clients a week to 30 clients a week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm barely working. I should have more clients. So, I mean, I don't know what the correct number is, but I've bounced between, the 20 to 40. So it's definitely a big difference.
I can relate to Kelly in that way too. I don't know if Jackie remembers saying this during a class at this point, almost a decade ago. She said, when you're in private practice, a good number is 25. And almost a decade now, I've kept that in my head. And so in private practice, like you said, Kelly, I go, a good week is between 20 to 30, but my favorite is a solid 23. That's my favorite. But in community mental health, it's way different. And I know for me personally, when I was starting out and a new therapist right out of school, for some reason, my goal was like to challenge myself, like how many clients can I see? How many billable hours can I have? And right now in this conversation, and also being in a different place in my career, I wonder how much of that was me and how much of that was being pushed by the agencies. And, you know, if I have this many numbers, then that means that I'm just a good worker, which I think is a whole nother system in and of itself. That's probably a whole different conversation. And also to circle back to what Kelly said, some folks were, you know, had the opportunity to not have student loans, but I personally have student loans. And that reasoning of like, oh, well, you have student loans. If you take on more clients, then you'll be able to meet that and do that. Or even staying in community mental health for 10 years to get your loans excused. I think a lot of those terminologies can create things such as resentment, guilt, shame, burnout, and just feeling stuck in a space where you feel like you're further away from what your passion was when you started this journey of saying, I want to be in this type of work. This is what I want to do for my career.
I think to that point, oh, sorry.
Kelly, please, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to that point, I think there's definitely been like just a dynamic that's been created where it's almost like I can remember the tone being almost like you can either help people or you can make money. Those are your options. And I remember when I was first thinking about transitioning to private practice, you know, it's a mixed bag. And there are a lot of colleagues who would be like, oh my gosh, you're not going to be able to help anyone. You're nobody, you know, what are you going to do? And so it becomes, you feel very guilty when you start to try to advocate for yourself as well and what you want for your life and the amount of money that you should be making. And I mean, it's definitely something that I still struggle with now, is this sense of like, I don't know if I should be charging this much, or I don't know, you know, it just creates this really weird dynamic where you feel like, again, you can either help people in a community setting, or you can put yourself in this place where you are kind of setting yourself up for success.
I just laughed because it is so true, right? I mean, there is this sense of pride, right? That, oh yeah, I work so hard, right? So at one point I was like, oh my gosh, I am seeing 10 clients a day. And I felt good. I was completely exhausted, but I was like, I think I am doing a good job, since I am just working all day long. And so now that I'm on my own, I have, you know, all of this time, and there is this guilt part and this shame part, and, you know, this how am I gonna feel good about what I do if I don't work from, you know, since the sun goes up and the sun goes down, right? And so in some way, yes, we are told, you know, to do these things, right? But there is that part of us that wants to prove that we are great. And so it might not be the best way to prove to ourselves that we are doing a good job, right? And so when I hear this, like, you know, how can I, you know, work less and get paid more, there is this like, oh, that doesn't sound good, right? And yet we know that, well, I want to, you know, pay my bills, right? But I also want more than that, right? And so when I help, yes, you know, the purpose that we have, you know, is to help, is to be there, you know, to not just, you know, improve us, but help someone else. And yet, you know, the exciting part that helps us, you know, go on is that, well, it does feel good to go on a trip that I can easily pay for.
Absolutely. So this underlying theme of take on more cases, these expansive caseload, and as I asked earlier about like, a typical caseload that you'll see in an agency, I've worked in spaces where you're having up to 65, sometimes 70 clients on your caseload. And to Natalie's point, sometimes you're seeing 8 to 10 patients in a day. Emma, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add kind of on top of, so to provide for numbers for my last just kind of, I think ours was for a full-time salaried, it was 26 clients a week, which compared to what everyone else is saying sounds pretty great. And still, right, everyone found it difficult to reach that. And I think to kind of add the perspective of a couples and family therapist, that productivity was the same for us as well. And I think what often, isn't recognized is the amount of work that goes on, especially for those couples and family cases on the outside, specifically families. Like I've had a family of 6, 4 boys, and I was doing collateral for all 6, right? And all of that goes unnoticed and isn't counted in my productivity, right? And so I think also a challenge for family therapists specifically is that productivity expectation is the same, right? So whether I'm meeting with a family of 6 or I'm meeting with 1, not that one is easier or harder than the other, but there's a lot more that goes into that process in the background. And I think something that's been my experience is kind of feeling devalued as a family therapist. And we see that in insurance companies and rates changing and all of that happening and clearly seeing that a lot of family therapists, especially in the IHT world, like it's kind of another beast, right? So I think that's another thing to keep in mind, that even if the number seems like doable, there's so much more that we're expected to do in the background that can really actually take away from the care that we're able to provide if we don't feel like we have the bandwidth, I can't call, their therapist this week and then then what happens next because I don't have the bandwidth, right? So I think that's another thing that often goes unnoticed for the therapist that I want to be. I want to be engaging in a lot of collateral work, and I want to have good notes, and I want to have good assessments and all of those things. But I think the system is not set up for us to, give that the attention we want, which in my opinion can negatively impact the client's experience if we're not getting all, hearing from all the systems that they feel supported by.
Emma, to your point, I think you're absolutely right. It's funny because I didn't even remember this, but being considered full-time, it was a similar number to what you were saying, like 25, 30 clients, whatever the case was. But I can remember us having to, like, at different agencies, we would have like boards up where it would say how many openings you had, and you would have to adjust this per week. So your productivity is out there on display for everybody to see. And you'd get check-ins frequently about how many more people can you see. And, I do think that there's this sense of, even though you're full-time and you get the benefits and you're, you kind of meet that standard at 26 or whatever that lower number is, there's almost an unspoken expectation that you're going to go above that. At least in my experience, it was this sense of like, oh, you're only doing 26, like you have lots of time for more. And then, like we've talked about, just kind of pushing more of those cases on you. And there were definitely incentive programs depending on how many more clients you're doing, which is another, again, you battle that sense of, well, I need the money, so maybe I should take on a few more cases. So, but yeah, to your point, you're right. There's this sense of like, it's a full caseload, maybe a lower sense, but they're still, I've had the experience of them like pushing more than that on me.
So I wanted to add to that, because I have not worked as a full-time. I have always worked as a fee for service, and so I never felt this like push, like you should see more. But I knew that, well, if I do schedule 8 clients a day, how many am I actually gonna see? And then I know that I will actually make less. And I think that has changed a bit, in the last few years, now that we can use Zoom, right? That, if it rains, if it snows, the client and I can still meet, and so I can still get paid.
And I think what we're all speaking to and touching on is the salary of it all, right? And that's a huge challenge. It's not a secret to anyone. And I think that also trickles into, time and what we're being paid are huge challenges in the agency world, right? We're new therapists coming out, most likely, and we want the trainings, we want the resources to be able to have the time for trainings. And in my experience was, some places might offer that in-house, so to speak, right? And oftentimes that hasn't been my experience, right? And so then we're also paying out of pocket for external trainings while also having to take a personal day, right? Or take sick time, or, try to fit that in. And I think that's something that was really important for me. And so not being able to have the bandwidth, the time to do that, or the resources financially to be able to build on my knowledge and be a better therapist and learn more. I think that was a huge challenge for me as well, being able to do everything I wanted to, and having the time to do it.
All very valuable points, and definitely things that, I could have also related to in my time with agencies, and just how these things will wear you down and eventually force you to make that decision of what's next for our careers. So we've talked about the challenges, we have talked about all the benefits, and if we're supposed to look towards the future, and how could agencies probably work on improving some of these systems to make it more attractive for newer clinicians, reduce burnout, have more clinicians wanting to stay in the agency world, as we talk about, ways that we can improve, thoughts that are coming to our minds of what could the agencies be doing differently.
I think that, oh, Natalie, you can go. I
Go
think
ahead.
that agencies having more diversity on their boards and those who are at the top, because oftentimes agencies are run by folks who have business degrees and who see things in numbers and from a different mindset. And I think if more people at the very top were social workers, therapists who have done the work, there could really be a different type of advocacy, and not just from a place of word of mouth or being the person who's delivering the message when like they come and speak to clinicians or supervisors who are actually in the field, and then go back to those meetings they have and say, well, this was what was reported, as opposed to having someone at the table who has that very experience and can give a firsthand discussion about it to inform what is practical and what actually is realistic.
Absolutely. Thank you for that feedback, Portia. And I want to say you are probably correct. And majority of leadership teams are built with people with business degrees, and numbers are typically the bottom line when we look towards these different changes that we're implementing in agencies. Other thoughts in terms of opportunity for agencies to improve their systems, that they can better retain their therapists and attract new talent.
I did have a small thought, just to go back to what we have said, about how great it would be if we were trained more, right? If there were more ways for us to learn, where, if I want to learn some, some new things that, well, I can get help to pay for those, right? And if there's a book that I want want to read, right, to get help with that too. It's all these small things, you know, so that we can feel like the quality of the work that we do is much more important than the quantity.
Absolutely. So just some more flexibility. Some agencies do provide funds for CE trainings, but it's very limited. Like you will only get reimbursement for those trainings. So expanding that. So if you want to purchase materials for education and development, that you're able to also do that. I think that's something to keep in mind as we look to attract new people and retain our therapists. What else can we do besides offering the standard CE credits reimbursement that we give? Thank you for that, Natalie. Emma?
Yeah, I think, I came up with a list in my mind of tangible ways, but at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to is leadership building a stronger understanding of like the day-to-day experience of people that are working there. And I think that that's a huge pitfall. I think there's an element where I have felt heard in the past, and then what happens with that, right? What happens with that request? What happens with that, expression of something I'm really struggling with? So I think like finding the balance between feeling heard, beyond my supervisor, feeling heard in people that are in positions of power to be able to hear me, while also having a plan in place, having, an action plan, or, these are the steps we're going to take, and being very clear and open and transparent about the steps that they're going to try to take to even look into that, right? Even if there isn't an answer, right? I think being, having a willingness to try to get creative around how to meet these needs if we can't, increase one's salary, right? If insurance companies are still going to pay these rates, right? Finding other ways to have your staff feel supported, because at the end of the day, and I feel like a lot of what we're seeing now is like we all get burned out in our first couple of years, and then we jump into our private practices because we've been so burned out and there's no other option, right? And I think I have always wanted to stay in mental health, and I'm experiencing that happening, right? How can I possibly sustain this? And so I think we're dealing with a larger issue, and I think if there's ways that leadership can hear us, and I think kind of meet our needs if we just get a little bit more creative, right? If that is providing more free trainings, if there's more group supervision time being put into people's schedule, if there's peer supervision groups, I think like having those consultation spaces is a huge value add. And hopefully staff are getting paid to join those, right? Especially fee for service folks who feel like they have to just have sessions to be able to get paid. And so I think finding ways to actually hear the people that are meeting the clients in the day-to-day is what's going to keep them there, right? If we feel like our needs are being met, even in these small ways, even if there's nothing that we can do in the next month, but what conversations can we have? I think just feeling heard goes a long way. And I think again, everyone's spread too thin, but I think there needs to be more value put on the people that are in the day-to-day.
Being heard and meeting the needs of the folks who are meeting the needs of the clients. That's important. Kelly, did you have any final thoughts for us on how agencies could possibly improve?
Well, mine's not as eloquent as everybody else's, but I made a list, and I think a lot of it kind of comes back to the amount that we're getting paid. And of course, that's not always realistic to increase the pay of the clinicians, but I think if you have a higher pay rate, you're going to get more clinicians who are going to be there. And then with that, the expectation of how large of a caseload you're going to have is going to be down. I think the burnout for supervisors and the burnout on the way up that ladder is going to be, it's going to be less, hopefully, or ideally, and again, I think at least from my experience working in agencies, I had, like everybody else was saying, really difficult cases and really difficult clients who were dealing with a lot of intense stuff and family stuff and, you know, residential things, in-home things, you know, and just kind of thinking about how you're burnt out. And on top of that, you're not getting paid enough to sustain your own life or to kind of manage your own needs. I think just creates this sense of, even if I am getting that support, I'm still, you know, I'm still not able to sustain my own life and kind of what I see for myself. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Kelly. And just to, you know, thank everyone. Thank you to Portia, Natalie, Emma, and Kelly. You know, very insightful. A lot of the stuff that you guys brought up today were things that we've all experienced in the agency world. And I hope that this discussion is just the beginning of trying to reshape what we're experiencing in the agency world and how we can have better training, better retention, better compensation, and feel like we're being heard more by our leadership team, by insurance companies who, you know, change things, as you say, Portia, on a rapid basis of what they require of us. And, you know, as we think about how we want to move forward and, you know, help and shape in the future of our therapists who are coming on board. So thank you, everyone, for participating and joining us today. And I'll turn it over to Jeremiah.
And Sanjay, thank you so much for organizing this conversation as well. This is a fantastic conversation. And to those of you who are watching this on the Zoom channel, on our YouTube channel, please share this with your colleagues, because building a more equitable system for our newest therapists is going to involve the voices of our entire psychotherapy community. So where do we go from here? There are a lot of options for us to turn to next. First, we invite you to share about your ideas for improving and engaging the agency experience by writing an article for the New England Journal of Relational and Systemic Practice. Learn more about how to do this online at www.nejournalrsp.com. And second, for this platform, if we're going to have an agency system serve as a postgraduate pre-licensure training ground, what do we know about the professional needs, emotional needs, and the financial needs of our newest therapists? And how can we create policies and expectations on the agency level that aligns with the research that we have about therapist development? We'll talk more about the inconsistencies between current policy and the needs of our newest therapists, and how we can work together to bridge the gap in the next edition of Equity in the Agency Experience, which is Wednesday, May 18th from 12 to 1. Thanks so much for watching.